Quick question for you, Lee, is what do you see happening as far as the dairy industry supplying more beef, considering we've got sex semen and embryo technology now?
Yeah, certainly in the United States, we're starting to, for the first time. You know, we had this, obviously, this big trend that we were struggling to replace the milking females because of reproductive failure. And now with sex semen, we're producing enough females. There's starting to be a lot of beef semen going to dairy cows again. And that's pretty unusual. But the flip side of that is that because of all the things we're talking about, we're going to produce more milk out of fewer cows. And so we see probably that global trend in the volume of dairy cows, at least in the developed world, is probably not going up. And so it becomes a relatively insignificant amount of change, in my opinion, Brian. Question over here.
You talked about intensive livestock production. Can you see the beef business going somewhat similar to the dairy industry in the fact that we go into confinement and then start turning out these calves as finished animals in that 12, 13, 14 months and start calving 365 days of the year in a confined operation?
It's funny because in our country you can hear both ends of this spectrum of discussion. Okay, there's still a significant segment of producers in our country saying, because of this high grain, you need to go to 100% grass and cut your costs and go low intensity, and the low cost producer wins. I don't think that gels with the vision that I have of what's going to happen demand wise. Okay, I mean, sure, you can do that and you'll be profitable, but what if cattle prices? I sit back and I say, when I got into the industry in 1989, when I got out of college, we'd never seen fed cattle prices over 80 cents a pound. Okay, I can go to Paraguay today and fed cattle are worth $1 in Paraguay. Okay, it's like the worst market in South America. Okay, so the paradigm has shifted, and when we went over 80 cents, and now we're sitting up at $1.20. And I can tell you we're going to be north of $1.30 by next year. We're going to see $2 per pound calves in the United States, sure as can be next fall. And when this fed cattle deal runs up to $1.50 or $1.70, which it's going to in this 10-year time horizon, we're going to see incentives shift that allow things that are totally outside of our paradigm. Right? And I think in those situations, depending on where you're located, if you're in a region that's near an ethanol plant, you can get wet distiller's grain, and you can harvest low-quality forages, and you can put together a ration. You can work out the math. You can feed that cow cheaper per day in that confinement facility than you can feed her out on grass. And I just think that those economics are going to prevail, and I think it's going to incentivize us to do all kinds of things that are different than what we think of today. And certainly the image that you painted of confined animals, calving, trying to shorten that interval down and push all that, I think that could be part of it. I think it's feasible to think that could work.
Lee, a question here on return on investment with respect to what you think the return on investment needs to be for the various sectors of the cattle industry in order to keep them sustainable.
I don't think it's just a cattle business. I think it's any business. I think the reality is capital goes to its best point of investment. And if you want to attract capital into an industry, you're going to have to be at or close to double-digit return on investment. Okay? And I mean, the funny thing is, when I was growing up, we never saw that in cattle operations. I went down to South America, and here were places that were talking about cash flowing at close to 10%. Plus the appreciation in their land. And they were enthused. Okay? Now, what happens, of course, is as land's limited, that price of land has catapulted up, and their return per hectare is not that good anymore. But the reality is that if all this goes on, we're going to continue to see high rates of property appreciation in addition to cash flow. And I think when we add that all together, for sure the outlook going forward is higher than it's been looking backwards. I don't know that we can expect it to be much north of 10%, but I think we'll be close to that. And a big chunk of that will be an appreciation on the land values. And I think that's what it's going to take to stay there. If we ever get above that 10% level, we're going to see expansion of production, but I don't anticipate that.
Okay, question back to pasture-fed beef again, just because of the demand rather than the production value. Do you see the demand increasing in the future?
Well, let me make a distinction, okay? One concept is niche markets, and one concept is mainstream, okay? I don't see us going away from grains feeding in the mainstream market. There are going to be more niches developed always, okay? And I think those niches are going to be increasingly lucrative, but they're going to be small percentages of the total mix, okay? And I think we see that, and we see that in all things. We see that in beer production, okay? I mean, you got all kinds of niches, but they're not going to take over the mainstream market. Consumers, I mean, one of the statistics is by the end of the decade, there are going to be 5 billion people with a cell phone, okay? And the cell phone is going to have more computational power than the original mini computers that they built that were the size of this room. I mean, they already have that, okay? So, I mean, technology is changing so much, and the ability of individual consumers to seek out exactly what they want is going to increase. We're going to see more niche marketing. So niches, I think, are here to stay. But I don't think that they're going to, I think if you said that the global production of protein is going to move towards forage, no, not going to happen. Be more niches, but not the mainstream.
By 2020, By 2020, the ongoing debate on environmental sustainability aspects, such as emissions and its correlation with livestock operations and its impact on the competitiveness and differentiation that we can offer from this region, i.e. North America, in terms of competing with low-cost production elsewhere. How do you see that?
The question was, how do I see, and I think I captured it, how do I see, given the pressure environmentally, how do I see the difference between intensive production, say, in North America and extensive production in South America? Would that, or in other places, would that capture your question? It's a great question. Can we use adoption of technologies to, say, minimize our carbon footprint and utilize that as a marketing tool? You know, there's been a big move by our Cattlemen's Association in the United States because the perception in the marketplace is that these forage-based systems have a smaller carbon footprint than do these intensive systems. And in fact, when they've gone through and tried to characterize that, at best, it's a wash, but in most likelihood, the intensive systems have a smaller footprint than do the grass-based system, simply because you get so much more output per unit of livestock in the intensive than you do under the extensive. The extensive, you have more animals around and they're around longer, and then as a consequence, your carbon footprint's bigger. So it's really counterintuitive. You think that the carbon footprint's smaller if you didn't have in these intensive. It's actually larger, okay? Any way you cut it, livestock have a bigger carbon footprint than non-livestock, okay? Any way you cut it, I don't think you're going to be able to bend that deal, okay? I don't think that any of the stuff we're doing is going to change that. And so you say, well, then maybe we'll move away from life. No, I think people are going to eat protein, and I don't think they're going to make protein without livestock. That's just my opinion, okay? That doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of what the carbon footprint is. What I'm saying is that when people have money and they want to eat it, their vote is going to count more than the people that are worried about the footprint. I hate to say that, but I think that's the reality economically.